All right. In this video, we're going to be talking about how do you set boundaries with your wife. And I run into this time and time again with clients where at a certain point after you cleaned up your act, she's still doing behaviors that are frankly either unacceptable or just not supportive to creating a healthy, productive marriage. So I frequently have to coach my clients on how do you set a boundary and not just like oh, you can't do this anymore, but from a healthy place, in a place that's going to lead more likely towards a growth in the relationship versus more disconnection. Because there are unhealthy ways of setting boundaries, which I'll talk about how that ends up happening, that will actually push her away. But when you set boundaries from a healthy place, it can actually bring you guys closer. It can shift the relationship towards a healthier dynamic. And this is actually what leading is, right? Leading is when you set boundaries this way, you're going to be leading the marriage to a better place. So let's dig in. The first thing you're going to do is clear yourself. And this is where most people mess up. Like, this is like the biggest thing, right? And this is the difference between setting boundaries from a healthy place and an unhealthy place, because there are times where things are going to happen, right? Where she's going to do things, it's going to trigger you. And if you're triggered and in a reactive state and you try to set a boundary, you're like, no, it's not okay because blah, 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 just because you're upset by it, that is going to create a very bad situation, right? That's you just saying like, ouch, you hurt me. I can't let you hurt me again, right? So I'm doing this so you can't hurt me again. What does that come across as? Well, that's what children do. Okay, that's a very weak place to set one. You want to set your boundary from strength, from saying like, hey, this is happening. Like, I'm not going to die from this, but I'm not going to accept it. Like, it's not okay with me. Right. And if this is going to continue, then blah, 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 blah. Right. You want to set your boundary from a place of power. And first you have to clear out that trigger and reaction that is coming from. Because also what's going to happen is when you clean that out, it's going to allow you to see things much clearer as well. You're not acting from a place, because when we're triggered, we're reactive, we're actually like, 50% dumber, I think is what the science says. So what you really want to do is make sure you're clean on that, which means maybe you have to journal about it. Maybe say, why does this impact me? Maybe if you're in therapy, have them help you unpack what's going on there and get to the point where it's not as impactful when it happens, but you realize it still needs to not happen anymore, right? I'll give you an example. I have one client whose wife would say very mean things, like just name calling, very like unacceptable ways of being treated. I was like, okay, first, let's make sure you're in a place where like you're not even taking that name calling seriously. Like, it's not impacting you because you know you're not those things and you're back into a place of strength. Let's get that taken care of first. Then let's go set the boundary, right? Then let's go say, okay, hey, in our marriage, we can't do this. We can't be calling each other's names. And I'm not going to be in a marriage where name calling is the norm. Like, it's just not okay. And I'll talk to you about the other pieces. So clearing yourself, that's step one. Step two, you want to assume positive intent. What does this mean? Is assume that the behavior that's happening, the thing you're saying boundary, is like, she's not a bad person, right? She's not doing this because she's bad, because wants to be malicious, like that she is trying to hurt you. Assume that this is still a reasonable, caring, loving human being. Whether it's true or not, if you approach it from assuming that she is still a loving, caring, rational human being, you're going to approach the conversation from a much different place than if you're coming from like, okay, this person is fundamentally bad and I need to stop them from doing bad things. Like, those are two very, very different energies. And you want to make sure that you come from a place of assuming positive intent, right? So this is right before the conversation, right? Next is you want to identify the behavior. So you want to be really crystal clear. What is the very specific thing that you need the boundary around? So for example, a client came to me, it's like wherever I'm driving, she has an open alcohol container. And that for a laundry list of reasons, that was a problem, right? So the very clear behavior that boundary needed to be set by was her having an open container in the car. Now, if he hadn't thought that through, it could have expanded to drinking. Like you're drinking too much and all that, and trying to set a boundary around drinking, which would have been a nightmare, right? The thing that actually needed to be resolved was the open container in the car, not the drinking as a whole. So you have to make sure you identify the specific behavior that you're setting a boundary around. Okay. Next, you're going to share impact. So how is this behavior impacting you? So this is when so right here is where you're having the conversation, right? Really, actually here. So I'll model to you how the conversation goes. Let's say we used the drinking example before, right? So we're going to assume that she doesn't want to cause legal troubles for him and the kids and whatnot, that she's not trying to set a bad example for the children or anything like that, right? So we're assuming positive intent. We identified the behavior. Now we're going to share the impact. So that's going to look like, hey, we need to have a conversation about the open containers inside the car. Right? So very specific behavior. I know that you're not trying to cause any issues with this, assuming positive intent. I know that you are just trying to decompress after a long day or whatever might be, assuming positive intent. Now you're going to share the impact. What I need to share with you is that when you have an open container, I believe it gives the children a bad impression that I'm a medical professional. So if we get pulled over, I could potentially lose my license, et cetera, right? You're going to share the impact, essentially the problem with it, right? So you can say share impact or problem. All right, and you're going to do that. Next step. You can get curious, right? And this is optional depending on the situation, but it's ideal if you can do it. Because if we're assuming positive intent, there's a reason why she's doing this behavior. So you want to get curious about that reason. So, hey, I know that you don't want to do things. So can you help me understand, like, why do you feel the need to do this? Like, what's going on your side that's making this happen? Maybe we can discuss that and figure this out. And what you'll find is a lot of times, if you're truly curious and you're assuming positive intent, that can open up a conversation that will actually resolve the behavior without a boundary even needing to be set. Right? So through that curiosity, understanding what's going on, what hurts, you might be able to find the solution that doesn't even require a boundary in the first place, which then you're leading you guys to a resolution without having to create any chance for disconnection or anything like that. So that's the power of getting curious when you do this. Okay. So you've gotten curious, you found out that the reason is for something that can't be solved right then and there. It's just something she's going to keep doing. Maybe she's being defensive. Maybe she's fighting. Maybe she's saying she's not going to change or whatever, right? Then you're going to go into step 6. Which is you're going to request or update. So request could look like, hey, moving forward, I have a request that you don't do this anymore, right? But for all these reasons that you share, I need you to not do this anymore. Can you agree to that? right? Making a request. And if she says yes, problem solved, you guys are good. She says no, you can do update. And if you're not going to make a request and you just want to go to update, you can also do that. Just depends on the situation. Like if it's just say she got physically abusive with you, that's an update, right? You don't need to make a request. So not hit me. You're like, hey, this is not acceptable. So you just have to kind of judge what you have to do. But an update is simply, hey, moving forward, this is no longer okay. And with an update has to come a consequence. And if it happens again, then I will do blank. So this is not okay. If it happens again, this. That's how you update. You're giving her an update that, hey, this is the new rules that we play by. If you're not willing to play by those rules, this is what's going to happen. And this is where a lot of guys mess up, is they don't share what the consequence, especially when they're in a marriage crisis, because they're like, I don't want to potentially cause and disturb and push her further away. If it's something that warrants a boundary, you have to do this. Like you have to, because one, for your own integrity and self-respect more than anything else. But also when she realizes what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, that gives her a chance to calibrate. And some part of her will respect you doing that. As long as it's coming from a healthy place, you're clearing yourself. You're not just reacting in the heat of the moment saying, no, you can't do this anymore, because then you just look like a weak chump, right? If you're coming from a clear place, from a place of power and just saying, hey, this can't work anymore, then there will be a level of both self-respect and respect from her. Don't do this for that. Do it because it needs to be done. But that is frequently what will happen. So the only other thing I will share is prep this until you get used to it. Plan this ahead of time. Go through each of these 6 steps. Write out your answer to each one before you go have the conversation. Have a plan. Be clear what you're going to say around each of these things. Then step into the conversation. Ideally, give her a heads up. Like, hey, when you have 15 minutes, I need to talk about something, right? Get her a chance to ground that the conversation happening. Don't just bring it out of the blues. Like, hey, we need to talk about this and this and this and this. Don't surprise her with it. Ideally, sit down, calm, looking face to face if you can. Depending on your situation, you may not be able to, but keep it as neutral and safe of an area or environment as you can create for this. That's going to reduce her chance to get defensive, make her more open to receiving what you're saying, and create just a greater chance of a positive outcome. And positive outcome as you guys move closer with connection versus disconnection. All right, so that is setting a boundary with your wife. If you have any questions, let me know. If you want more advice, courses, feedback on how to help your marriage, just click the link below. I have tons of courses, guys, down there. And I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.